train wasn't particularly menacing. Quite the opposite, in fact, as it is very hard to be menacing while being brightly coloured, well lit and full of smiling ponies. Nonetheless, as Applebloom stood there in the station, looking at the brightly coloured, well lit train full of smiling ponies, only one thought came to mind. Menacing. She stood on the platform, watching as it pulled to a stop. It was one of the newer stations, installed by order of Celestia a few years ago. It still had that new train station smell, which is, much like the smell of new horseshoes, only with a great deal more coal. It must at this point be said that there was nothing wholly remarkable about the train station, or for that matter its rather cheerily painted trains. But at exactly 1 in the afternoon something wholly remarkable was set to occur. By the small clock in Applebloom's bag, it was 7 minutes past noon. Applebloom turned to Applejack, still finding it odd that they were almost the same height now. She was exactly as tall as her sister, if you counted in the large red bow, but since red bows do not count under any known system of measurement, she would have to wait a while longer. Still, the way things were going, she would probably be taller when it was all said and done. During the time it had taken her to become this tall, she'd begun to notice that growing up is an altogether unpleasant thing that should be avoided at all costs. But alas, time is a hard, stubborn thing, so Applebloom had no choice but to face the fact that she was no longer a filly, though she could not rightly be called a mare either. She was in that odd place every pony ends up at one point or another, in between places, and therefore nowhere at all.
Have you got your lunch?
Applejack bit her bottom lip.
Yes.
Have you got your apple seeds?
Yes.
Have you got your water?
Yes.
Applebloom nodded a final time. Her sister patted her on the side, her face tense in that happy kind of way only older ponies ever seem to be able to manage. Applebloom knew she was worried, and she'd probably stay worried for quite a while yet. But it was time. All fillies went through with it, with colts tossed in for good measure. For some, it was a small change. One day they walked down the street, and with little or no warning, it happened. They crossed from one side to the other, or came to realize they'd arrived at their destination quite a long time ago, and had only just realized it. They were the lucky ones. For the rest of the ponies in between, it takes a bit more. They remain nowhere, unsure of where they're going. This can be a scary thing. Every pony wants to be somewhere, wherever there is. Applebloom looked at her flank, still as blank as the day she was born, and hoped that there would be on the other side of the tracks, stretching into the horizon. The ticket in her saddlebag suddenly felt very heavy, the weight of the words "one way" threatening to send her tumbling to the ground. But she was an apple, and apples were a strong, hearty breed. She was honest, she was brave, she was smart, and looking back at her sister, she knew she was also loved. Back at home, she had a brother and a grandmother waiting. They would see her off, and welcome her home, no matter what happened. Applebloom would certainly need to remember this, but doubly so in about 65 minutes. The clock read 10 minutes past noon. This whole thing had been Scootaloo's idea. Her impulsive Pegasus friend had told her if she couldn't find somewhere here, then somewhere must rightly be somewhere else. It only made sense. This was, of course, very solid logic, or at least in the mind of Scootaloo, to whom logic was a tenuous friend at best. Still, she'd tried everything else. Sweetie Belle hadn't thought it was a very good idea, but Sweetie Belle had recently found her way to the other side, a microphone adorning her flank. She was currently the prime act at the local theatre several times a week. Applebloom did not want to be jealous of her friend, but had to admit she did feel a slight twinge of anger at not receiving hers. She knew it was wrong to feel that way, but feelings are seldom obedient things, always doing the opposite of what we may want them to. Like a particularly haughty cat who only wants you to pet it when you're very busy doing something else. So, driven a bit by pride, a bit by jealousy, and perhaps, more than she wanted to admit, a bit by fear, she'd purchased the ticket, packed her bags, and told her family she was heading out to find that somewhere. She would return when she found it, but until then, she would be away. Applejack had done the same in her youth, so they couldn't rightly object. Not to say this stopped them from doing so, but being an apple, in addition to all the other things the title carried, she was stubborn. It was her aging grandmother who'd relented first. After that, her siblings had little choice but to agree and help her pack. So, with the ticket in her bag and a slight dread in her stomach, she'd set off. Applejack, like many ponies, was not very good at goodbyes, which is an irony considering the name. Applebloom, knowing this, kindly initiated with a hug. Her sister's hooves were strong as always and felt terribly safe. For a moment she considered abandoning the whole thing and heading back home for a bit of cider and perhaps a cookie. But apples don't do anything halfway. If they did, they wouldn't be apples, and as sure as her tail was red, she was an apple.
Good luck, little sister.
Applebloom managed a small smile.
I'll see you soon.
Applejack managed a small one in return.
You better.
All aboard!
Called the porter, a rather wiry unicorn in a blue hat.
That's my cue.
Applebloom turned towards the train.
Tell Big Mac and Granny Smith I'll send a letter when I get there.
I sure will. Goodbye, Applebloom.
Applebloom was stuck for a moment. The words seemed so final. She instantly decided that the term goodbye was terribly named.
Goodbye, Applejack.
So, Applebloom gave her ticket to the porter, who punched a little hole in it and ushered her onto the train. She could just see over the heads of the ponies milling about the car as they packed up their luggage, directed foals, and generally did busy things. They paid her little attention, as she found her room in a car at the back of the caboose. A small window let in the sun, illuminating a very small bed and an even smaller nightstand. She couldn't help but think the bed looked terribly uncomfortable, compared to her much larger, much softer one back home. Though the train had not yet left the station, it suddenly felt terribly far away. The clock read noon. Applebloom sat the saddlebag on the floor next to the bed. It should now be noted that this saddlebag contained several things, but most importantly, her lunch, which consisted of a hay sandwich, apple slices, and some water, along with what was always carried by apples, a bag of apple seeds. Applejack was quite right to make sure Applebloom did not forget these items in particular, and she would do well to keep them in mind. The train's whistle blared shrilly through the air, signalling their departure from the station. She felt the floor shudder a bit as the conductor coaxed the engine to life. Applebloom looked out her window as they pulled forwards, and saw Ponyville slowly getting smaller in the distance. There was no turning back now. It has been stated, round about 1,102 words ago, that there was nothing remarkable about the station which Applebloom just left, nor the trains it housed. While this is technically true, there was indeed something remarkable about the tracks. This remarkable thing is that they lead through the Everfree Forest, which is a wholly remarkable place. The clock read 1:45 in the afternoon. Applebloom laid her head down as Ponyville finally vanished into the horizon. She was right. The bed was terribly uncomfortable, but it would have to do. She thought about where she was heading, and realized she couldn't even remember the town's name. It was on the ticket stub in her bag. She hadn't taken much time to look at it. When she'd gotten home to pack it away, she'd put it away in the deepest pocket under the water, the apple seeds and the sandwich, hidden like a secret. She hadn't even bothered to give it a look when she'd given it to the porter, either because she hadn't thought about it, or because she didn't want to. If she studied it for too long, it might change her mind. She didn't want that. Did she? Applebloom felt terribly unsure, but it was far too late now. Far too late. She needed to find somewhere to be. She was sick of being somewhere in between. There was a small chiming sound as the clock in Applebloom's bag struck 1 in the afternoon. The casual observer might note that it sounded slightly off-key, and a great deal louder than any small clock has the right to sound, but Applebloom is not the casual observer. The cabin suddenly grew dark as the train passed beneath the dense foliage of the every forest. Small flecks of light spilled from in between the leaves, painting the cabin in spots. Applebloom was distracted from her thoughts for a moment by how pretty it looked. They raced by, changing constantly as the train moved. Despite herself, she smiled. Suddenly, Applebloom felt herself being drawn forwards. She stumbled a bit. The train was slowing. She found this odd, and with good reason, as the station wasn't due for another few hours. She heard the clicking of plates from the dining car as they shifted around, and the heavy thuds of luggage falling from overhead racks. Something was wrong. Applebloom looked around her cabin, wondering what she ought to do. A mare might wait in the car until some pony came to alert them as to what was amiss, or the train started up again. But Applebloom was not a mare, not quite yet, in any case. She still had that bit of filly curiosity that led her to peek her head out the door and stare into the abandoned car which lay waiting outside. She gasped. There was no pony anywhere to be seen. Where only minutes ago there had been bustling activity, now there was nothing but silence. Luggage lay in various states of disarray on the floors and chairs, covered in the spots of light from the tree line. The whole car looked like it was trying to dress up as a cheetah for a nightmare night, which is quite a bit more frightening than it sounds when one is facing it alone in the middle of a train which had been fully occupied only moments before. They must have gone to their rooms, she thought. Yes, that's got to be it. There's simply no other explanation. She nodded to herself. This made quite a bit more sense than what small panicky voice in the back of her head was saying. Being not quite a filly, she decided to hush this voice and listen to the sensible option. She grabbed her saddlebag and walked through the passenger car until she came to a door. She raised a hoof and knocked twice.
Hello? Is any pony in there? It seems there's something wrong.
She waited, but there was no answer. The silence seemed incredibly loud. She knocked again. Still no answer.
Hello?
She tried the door, to find it was open. Sliding it back, she found that the inside was just as empty as the out.
Must just be an unbooked cabin. Yeah, that's it.
She ignored the fact that she was talking to herself, as worried ponies are prone to do. She walked, then trotted, then galloped around the train, knocking on various doors, only to find the other rooms as empty as the first. Applebloom was starting to very much doubt that her previous answer was in fact it. The conductor, she thought. He had to still be here, otherwise he would have stopped the train. She galloped, quite a bit faster than is classically polite, to the conductor's booth. It was behind a large green door, which looked quite a bit less cheerily painted in the light from the forest. Applebloom was quite thoroughly sick of knocking, and ripped the door open as quickly as she could. Thick moss and foliage spilled out into the car. She fell back onto her rump, pushed back by the sheer mass of it. Flowers sprouted everywhere in every colour, making the train look downright drab by comparison. Applebloom let out a yelp, scooting back quickly. The inside of the booth was dark. She couldn't see past the door. A deep voice, like the sound of pennies dropping on a hollow floor, echoed outwards.
Yes?
It asked, politely. Applebloom opened and closed her mouth a few times.
Well, what are you bothering me about?
What? How? Where are we?
Somewhere. That's where you wanted to go, isn't it? This is your stop.
No, this isn't my stop. I'm going...
She realized she had forgotten.
One moment.
She remembered the ticket stubs. Applebloom bucked off her saddlebag and fished through it until she found the small piece of paper.
Here.
She grabbed it in her mouth. She resisted the urge to pull back as a large vine curled forward and wrapped around the ticket. It held it up to the darkness for a moment.
Yep, there it is. Somewhere.
The vine hovered in front of her nose. Sure enough, now embossed in bright gold letters, were the words "somewhere" printed in fancy type.
But that wasn't on there when I bought it!
Applebloom got the strangest impression the collection of vines was shrugging.
Not my problem.
Well, I reckon it is your problem. Whatever you are. Where is every pony anyway? There were other passengers besides me. They certainly weren't heading for somewhere.
Well, of course not. This is your stop. They've all got their own stops. Now, please disembark, be sure to give us a good review, and avoid the unsure,
said the darkness.
But what happened to them? Where am I supposed to go? And what the heck are you?
Applebloom was confused.
I'm your conductor. Have a safe journey.
The door shut with a decisive click.
Wait!
Applebloom tried to open the door again, only to find it stuck fast.
You come back here right now! I'm not getting off here, I tell you! This isn't my stop!
There was no answer.
Fine! I'll just sit here until you start the train up again. See how you like that.
Applebloom sat down stubbornly. There was the sound of rattling leaves, or perhaps a sigh from behind the door. Suddenly the floorboard lifted upwards at almost exactly 70 degrees. Applebloom went tumbling end over end as the side of the train opened like a giant mouth. She was roughly deposited on the mossy ground of the forest.
What? Hey!
She was drowned out by the sound of the engine starting again. The train began to move forwards. Applebloom was on her hooves and chasing it before she even realized.
Wait! This ain't my stop! You let me back on right now, you hear?
The train did not hear. It sped up, and though she chased it valiantly, it soon outpaced her, and she was left staring at the caboose as it pulled off into the darkness of the forest. Soon she was left staring down the tracks, all alone.
Come back!
Remember, beware the unsure.
Echoed back after a few minutes.